Panic, 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 Hippy! Panic, 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 Hippy!
Welcome to the Panic Tippy podcast. Today we've got Hannah Rose Crabtree on here. She's the owner of Pocket Mansions, a company that offers tiny home design assistance, consultation, and a class that will show you what it takes to build safely and live comfortably in a tiny house. She's also helped pass tiny house legislation within Washington State, which is amazing, and is also a project manager at Babbitt Construction. It seems like you know pretty much everything you need to know about tiny houses. That's pretty amazing.
I try.
All right. Well, before we get into all of the amazing things that you've done and learned, what actually got you into tiny houses?
The very first video I saw and kind of my introduction to tiny houses was, oh, now I'm forgetting her name, Ella Jenkins. She is my top tiny house role model. I love her so much, and I always tell people to go back and read her blog because she chronicled every single step of building her tiny house. And I want to say, I double check, I think it's littleyellowdoor.blogspot.com, but if you typed in Ella Jenkins and tiny house, you would find it. I saw her house and I was sold. I mean, I was done. That was it. I had never heard of tiny houses, seen tiny houses. I was always planning to build my own home because my father built the home I was born and raised in. But when I saw her next to her tiny house, that was it. Like, it didn't take more than that. I was ready. And as soon as I got back from France, because I was in France at the time, I went to get as much money as I could to start building my house, like that fast.
Damn, nice. Okay, and so this was just kind of like the urge to just live in a tiny house?
I mean, it was so obvious because I had always been planning to build my own house, right? I had been born and raised in a house that my dad built, so I understood. It's not that he taught me how to build houses, but I understood it was a thing that a normal human being could do, right? Like, if my dad, a failed carpenter, could build a house, I myself could build a house, right?
Yeah.
So that was obvious. I knew I was going to do that. I knew I was going to build a house. And then when I just saw her standing next to her tiny house, it all clicked into place because I was like, oh, well, now I can build a house for, tens of thousands of dollars versus hundreds of thousands of dollars. And go back in time to my dad's prices. I mean, that jerk bought the property with a house on it for $17,000 in 1979 in West Seattle, and then tore it down and built a new home. And he only spent about $50,000 building that new home. And that's about how much I spent on my first tiny house 40 years later.
Wow. Yeah. So. It's just crazy. The price comparison between generations. Oh, yeah.
It's absurd because now that house is worth, $500,000, and it's this garbage house that he hand built. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, the land is worth $450,000.
Exactly. So yeah. Well, yeah. And so with that, when you were getting into the tiny house stuff, was it immediately like, I want to build it on a trailer, or were you thinking about being on a foundation as well?
No, my big thing was the trailer because it was like my plan B. Like, everything kind of coalesced. It's like I was in France. I was working as a pastry chef. My goal was to actually work in Disneyland as a pastry chef because you make the really big bucks making sugar art and stuff. So I was doing my final internship in France at this 3 Michelin star restaurant, and I was like, okay, gonna go get this really high paying job, gonna be able to build a house wherever I want, And then I saw the tiny house thing, and then my mom got lung cancer, and I was like, okay, well, I need to have a plan B, if I can't live with my mom. So my plan was basically, if the worst happened, my mom's okay, she's in remission, but the worst thing that would happen, my mom passes away, I could take that tiny house on a trailer and go live in Rice, Washington, because there's a farm there called Quillisasket, and I went there for farm school, and I know I could just pull up my trailer and live there and be on a farm. So that was the plan.
I see. Okay.
I had it all very planned out. So as soon as I saw Ella in front of a tiny house on wheels, game over. That was just the obvious solution to my life.
Yeah. So it was the thought of living in an RV and stuff was kind of nah, need having an actual house.
Yeah, no, that never seemed like an option because my dad lived in a kind of little mini travel trailer when he was building the house. So like my mom lived across the street, my sister was a baby, my dad was building the house, I wasn't born yet, and he was living in like this little garbage travel trailer in the backyard. And then I had to deal with that mess, right? Like I had to get that travel trailer out of the backyard, and it was like disgusting. You know, it had like caved in, like tree roots had grown through it, you know, there was like dead animals in it. So like, yeah, an RV didn't really seem like something like that was gonna last a lifetime.
Fair.
Whereas like you look at a tiny house, you're like, oh, that's a house. Like I can just resite it. I can like pump up the wheels. I can do whatever. It's going to be fine.
Exactly. Okay. Well, hey, it's good roundabout way of getting it to where it's like it's mobile and it's an actual house and I can live in it forever. Like,
yeah, done and done, right? Like it checked off every box, even boxes I didn't know I had. It was just so immediate. Like
nice.
Give me that thing. I want it.
Well, okay. And so when you first found Ella, when was this? Was this before like the huge movement of the tiny house thing?
I was in France in 2010. I think I got home. Yeah, I think I got home September 2010. And Jay Schaefer got on Oprah 2008. So the world learned about tiny houses in 2008. I did not learn about Jay Schaefer, and I learned about Jay Schaefer through Ella Jenkins. And I did drive all the way down to California to meet Jay Schaefer.
Wow. Dang.
Yes, because he is also just a massive role model, but Ella Jenkins was the portal to Jay Schaefer. So anyway, yeah, that is really kind of when the consciousness about tiny houses did break, because that was in 2008, got on Oprah. It became something that everybody knew was a real thing.
Well, and so what do you feel like how the tiny house movement has kind of turned into? Like,
it's just turned into like white people can do white people things. I mean, it's so gentrified. It's crazy. It's just like, oh, you know, if you live in a mobile home park, or you live in a park model RV, or you live in an RV, like that's disgusting, that's garbage. But if you live in this tiny house, like on your parents' property, like you're somehow living it up with the rich kids, right? Like it has really because all the TV shows, the HGTV shows, like show these young, usually like cis het white couples like out tiny house shopping, and that's really, really problematic, because it's not a good thing by any means that so many people are turning to alternative dwelling units because we can't just like afford a house. Like that is actually a horrible, horrible thing. So like romanticizing the tiny houses as like that's a thing you should strive for, or that like really means you made it, is I think really damaging to kind of a United States needs to take care of people, needs to house them. Like the United States has to do that.
Yeah.
So romanticizing, like you remember that article about the guy that works at Google and he lives just like in a U-Haul truck in the parking lot?
Oh God, yeah.
And it was just romanticizing him, like, oh, he's so brilliant because he uses the showers at work and he uses the gym at work and he uses the toilet at work and he does all these things. And it's like, no, he's homeless living in a parking lot. Like that's really, really bad. And we should not be talking about how these are like wholesome, great stories.
Yeah.
At all.
Well, and in that whole aspect, do you feel like tiny houses could be a potential solution for like the housing crisis and rent crisis?
Tiny houses are absolutely not a solution in any way, shape, or form. Tiny houses, when used by somebody that has access to either help building it, or they can build a lot of it themselves, or they can get materials donated, and they have family or friends where they can live for free, that is a saving grace. You know, you live there for 3-4 years. I know tons of tiny housers personally that have lived in their house for 3-4 years, and that has enabled them to save money and then just go do what anybody else would have done, you know, 20-30 years ago with a life, right?
Yeah.
But for somebody who does not have any assistance to be able to build or to be able to get materials, or you have to rent somebody else's land to live on, it's no different than you going out there to rent something. You don't own equity by owning a tiny house on a trailer. Like you just don't.
Yeah.
So it is absolutely not a solution. In fact, it even harms real solutions, because you have all these different, like even here in Seattle, like I've helped build like the little tiny house villages, but they're just like these empty boxes. So it's just kind of like a dryer tent, you know?
Yeah.
And that makes it worse because it looks like they're doing something to help, when in reality, you could just build dormitories and you could just let people pay to live in them. Like if you're going to let college kids live in dormitories and you're going to let soldiers live in barracks, you can build that for the general population and you can let them live. So it's kind of these red herrings showing, oh, look, we're doing something, like we're making housing. It's like, no, you're really not. And you 100% have the funds and the ability to make housing, and you don't want to do it. But like by putting these little pet projects in the limelight, like we have a thing in Seattle called the Block Project, right? And it's where they want to house one homeless person who's now not a homeless person. They are now in a house in your backyard on every single block, which like, okay, it's a huge amount of fundraising. It's a huge endeavor to do that when in reality, again, just take the housing money and make dormitories and house people. Like it's really not hard to house people, but capitalism makes it profitable to not house people and to not make it affordable, and it always will. So it doesn't matter. Like you can build houses for nothing. People coming up with something tinier or something cheaper doesn't mean that somebody will not take it and make it not affordable, right? A house can be paid off 15 times over, but you're still going to rent it out to somebody for a price they can barely afford. So the cost of housing and the size of housing and the housing availability, that's all just a government issue. And tiny houses are just a consequence of that going on for decades. It's not a solution.
Yeah, because that was kind of the mind-blowing thing that I saw when I had moved to Seattle was all of a sudden these giant skyscrapers pop up and it's all those micro apartments that charge like $800 a month.
Yes, exactly.
And,
see?
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. They did it. And you know, Apartments, when they came in, Apartments was actually founded by a person who was trying to make housing affordable. That was the means in which it was founded. And what happened? A rich person took it. They actually forced state legislation to change. They actually were able to minimize square footage requirements, which were put in place to stop slumlords, to put apartments in. And yeah, you're paying the exact same amount of money to live in an apartment, which has like physical and mental health effects when you have to like share everything with somebody else and you're given like very, very tiny space to exist on your own and forced to coexist in other ways and really not have any breathing room, and you're paying the exact same amount of money as having a studio or having your apartment. So this is not about the fact that we don't have the technology. It's not about the fact that we don't have materials. It's that it's a capitalistic society that profits off suffering. And there you go. Like,
yeah, no, I don't have any disagreement there. Like, yeah, it's interesting to see how capitalism likes to kind of circumvent a lot of issues by saying like, hey, here's this pretty little solution that like everyone can get like very emotionally attached to, because it's like, it's this adorable little house that's just for one person. It's beautiful, but it's like only 10 people can live in that little, like in Seattle, the Nicholsville type stuff. It's
like they're helping 10 people. And I mean, I walk down the street and it's nothing but tents. I mean, I've lived in Seattle my whole life, and now it's just getting overrun by tents. And it's like, you guys aren't not gonna do anything about that. Just gonna let this be. This is fun.
Yeah, and we'll sweep it every so often. So it's we're kind of cleaning up, you know. It's God.
And they'll pay tens of thousands of dollars to companies to do those sweeps, instead of just like, I don't know, giving people housing and then paying them to maintain it. Weird, like that. Yeah. Weird. I don't know.
It gets very annoying. Well, okay, and so in that vein, you see more of tiny houses being more of like kind of a more privileged middle class opportunity.
It's definitely a very privileged opportunity. I mean, I have met and know some people of color that do live in tiny houses, but that's pretty rare because you have to be a super non-threatening human to be able to go live in somebody's backyard, right?
Yeah.
Like you either need to be, you need to have family or friends that are going to let you use their yard. Or if you want to go live in a stranger's yard, you have to be super non-threatening, which is why you see the majority of tiny home dwellers being white ladies, because we're like the least threatening, right? And then that you see like a lot of white dudes who are also not threatening. Like you don't look like a threatening white dude, right? You look like you're really nice and you've got like this curly hair, right? Like you're non-threatening. Yeah, you're a non-threatening individual. And those people are the people that can go put up their tiny house on display at PCC, and people will rent their yard to you. And it's not a big deal. Mm-hmm. But if you have anything stereotypical that people are going to be afraid of, you're going to be now facing all these barriers because everything that we do in tiny houses is super duper illegal. It's super illegal. But nobody like calls the cops on us. So we get to do it. We get to just like illegally live in people's yards. So it's a very privileged thing to get to like break all these housing rules, to like have your own little tiny house.
Yeah. Do you see, like, especially with your experience with the Washington state legislation, do you see any kind of like widespread acceptance as tiny houses as a legal form of living?
Well, it's really interesting because the majority of people definitely did not understand it was illegal to live in tiny houses. So it doesn't really matter to tell them like, hey, we passed this really important legislation to legalize tiny homes. They're like, what are you talking about? Why wouldn't it have ever been legal? So that doesn't really change the public opinion. What matters is who's going to call the cops on somebody going in and out of their car or going into a yard. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's like, I've lived in this neighborhood. I've lived in Seattle my whole life. I could place my tiny house anywhere around town. Like, nobody is going to be suspicious. But you have people, you know, calling the cops on people of color at like insane rates, right? Mm-hmm. Or even just men of any color on insane rates. My boyfriend gets the cops called on him all the time, and he's just a white dude sitting in his car. Like, people are so scared in neighborhoods right now. Like, they're so terrified. They see anybody they don't know, they're gonna call the police, right? Yeah. So like, you get the cops called on you, and they're like, "Where do you live?" And then you make the mistake of being like, "I live in this tiny house." It's game over.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to be super non-threatening, not at all suspicious. You need to have really high privilege to get away with it in a lot of cases.
Yeah, so I guess you kind of see with like people who start getting into tiny houses, do you see them like, hey, you should probably look for like a plot of land outside of a city kind of a thing if you're really going to want to get committed to living in a tiny house? Or is it kind of...
No, that's actually like way worse. Mm-hmm. Because not little cities, like towns have people like city inspectors that'll just like drive around because they have nothing to do. Whereas in Seattle, like, our people are very, very busy. So like, when Seattle came out to my tiny house, like, they came out because they had been called. Whereas there's tiny houses all around the city and they drive by them all the time. They're not going to stop and investigate that. So you're way better off being in a big city, and especially in a really mixed neighborhood where you're used to that. So you're safer, like, being hidden in the mass of the big city. And then being smart enough to never admit you live in the tiny house, that you live in the main house.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It was interesting too. When I had my tiny house within Seattle, it was like there were like utility guys that would literally, they parked their truck like next to the tiny house. And I would be inside every so often, and I would hear one of the dudes be like, "Oh, that thing's awesome. I want to go and build one of those things." And it's like, okay. So it's like,
oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've had all sorts of people here from the city that would never have thought, other than to be like, "Oh my God, it's so cool."
Yeah.
You know?
It's an interesting dynamic of having the tiny house in the city of like, where do I stand on things? But yeah. Okay. Well, and so do you see this whole kind of tiny house movement leading to a better, I guess, understanding or model for like kind of sustainable housing, either within metropolitan areas or suburbs?
Problem is that the tiny house movement is people giving up on society to take care of them. And they're giving up on government resources to take care of them. And they have decided to take their shelter into their own hands. So the pathway to legalization, what that was about, I mean, never anybody would ever talk to me about that. For years, I was giving tiny house classes. They'd be like, "Oh, why isn't this legal? I want to just be able to do this." And I was like, well, as soon as it's legal, you can't afford to do it. So, and that's still true, right? So like, yes, we have a pathway to legalization, which what I'm hoping that will turn into is more people being able to open up their land for a lot of tiny houses. Like, I'm hoping that's what that kind of goes into. But that was actually the one legislation we didn't manage to get through. We were actually trying to get multiple pieces of legislation through. And one of them was for tiny house communities in rural areas, and that was shot down.
How interesting. Wait, yeah. Okay. So like, okay, so going off on that for tiny house communities then, like, do you see a future for those at all, or is that kind of like a
that's what we're hoping to get to, is doing further legislation to kind of pile on top of the starter legislation that we did. Because the starter legislation that we did, the best part about it is it recognizes what a tiny house can be through L&I. And that's important because then people have a way to safely build a home and really understand the codes and building around that. That's not going to stop a lot of people like me that are just going to like do a backyard tiny house build, but it gives people more options to go through, and that's important. But I don't want it to take away from the people that are just going to build whatever type of shelter they can as cheaply and simply as possible. Because if you go through the legal situation, you could wait up to 6 months for L&I to even approve your design, and you're going to have to pay an architect to get that thing stamped, right? So I mean, it's an intense process. I'm hoping that would really more lead to kind of tiny home manufacturers just being able to kind of like get these things out really cheaply and really efficiently and get them stamped by L&I, and then us to be able to get that type of housing being non-discriminated against in rural areas, so that then you could see a bunch of these be useful types of housing, right? But that's like a lot of process, right?
Yeah.
That's for people 10 years, 20 years from now. Whereas the other part of what I do is just, how do I get somebody into shelter right now? So that's when it's like having the workshops, having the design talks, telling people about the realities of what it means to live in a tiny house. How can you save money on it? How do you do those things yourself? And those are two like completely opposite sides of the spectrum.
I see. Okay. Man, yeah. So I guess in also in that with the tiny house like manufacturers, how do you see them like kind of operating currently, where I mean, it is kind of weird where it's like, yes, you follow some of the like construction guidelines and everything like that, but also it's like they're building something that isn't legal at the same time, and it's like how do you kind of bridge the gap there with any of these kind of companies, aside from like, I guess what you were saying was trying to pass the legislation so you can get that foundational document for all these companies to follow? Like,
yeah, it's an issue because you have rules and regulations for what somebody is to do with the home, right? So like if you take a step way back and you think about all of the victims of Hurricane Katrina that got formaldehyde poisoning because they were shunted into these little travel trailers. And travel trailers are not built for 24/7, 365 living, but it was such an emergency that these survivors, these victims, ended up staying in these travel trailers way longer. And they got formaldehyde poisoning because you're allowed to do certain levels of toxic VOCs because it's designed for you to only live in temporarily. So that's really these issues, is it's what's the end use product. So people think, oh, I'm going to buy a really cheap travel trailer from some company that manufactures travel trailers really cheaply and live in it. But in reality, that is going to be harmful for you because they're going to build it at the cheapest, lowest quality they can to pass those regulations. So then you kind of move up to RVs. And a lot of people do live in RVs full time. So I mean, that's better, but it's still very difficult to like live in an RV full time in the Pacific Northwest in a lot of regions, right? You don't see that as much as you do in other states. So that's kind of tough because you have tiny house builders that are RVIA certified, and they do build to a better standard. And I mean better more as just kind of insulation and moisture protection, dehumidification of those types of things, than an RV to like survive the winters and whatnot. But they don't have to, right? It's like when you buy a car, you don't think about it, but they have to do all these safety measures to build that car, right? So a tiny house manufacturer that doesn't have to build for somebody to live in it 365, 24/7 is really, really dangerous. So it is really important to have L&I inspect these builders and make sure they're building to a 365, 24/7 living standards, not building to an RV temporary recreational use living standard. So that's really where those standards are really, really important. Versus a backyard builder, I'm just going to be like, get your electrical inspected, get your plumbing tested, here's how you protect the air quality. Like, I'm going to talk to them about those really basic things to make sure it's livable for them and not to go through that whole process.
yeah, because in that whole process is a whole nother can of worms of fun
Yeah,
times.
and it's money and you can't afford
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So, and that's
Well,
another fight, is to go through that fight and lower the cost of doing that.
yeah, and I guess, do you kind of see that tiny houses is also kind of like almost a generational response too, where it's like, I guess around our generation, we kind of want to own our own house, but it's like
Yeah, that's
buying one
absolutely
is
what it is.
insane. Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely what it is. I mean, it's insane. It's insane for me to sit here and say my dad, not my granddad, not my great granddad, but my dad was able to buy property with a house on it in Seattle for $17,000. So we're here 40 years later, and if I want to buy a piece of property in the same neighborhood, it's $500,000. That's a $2,000 a month mortgage payment if I want that same luxury. I mean, that's absolutely insane, right?
Yeah.
So of course you would try to find any alternative to still get to feel like you have your own space, you have your own four walls. And that's another reason why it is a very privileged thing, because that's exactly it. We're coming out of this saying, well, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to have a house. And then you find out you can't have that. That's not reasonable for you to have. So you do the next best thing. So we all built these tiny houses, right?
Yep. And now we're all just hunting for places to put them, and we'll see what happens.
Yes, we will see what happens.
Yeah, because that's been the other interesting aspect that I've noticed is, like, I'm on a few different tiny house Facebook groups and whatnot. And it's just the amount of postings that come through where it's just like, hey, well, we've got this tiny house. Anybody got a place for us to put it?
I mean, like, on the one hand, yes, there's tons of those posts, but those people find places. Well, if they are willing to deal with people, they find places, right? Because people would always talk to me and they're like, okay, do I find a place first? Do I buy the house first? Like, no, buy the house, right? People want your money. People 100% want your several hundreds of dollars a month to be in their yard. They really do. You know, find a place that's secluded, find a place that has trees, find a place that already has RVs on the property. Like, it's there. Mm-hmm. The problem is that people think it's as simple as like, oh, I'm just going to go rent an apartment, so I'm going to check the apartment listings. Like, no, you're choosing to live in an alternative manner, and it doesn't matter how many HGTV shows there are. You're choosing to live alternatively, and that means you're going to have to talk to more human beings, which is hard, but it is what that means.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's an alternative form of housing that takes a lot of work to figure out where you're going to put that house too. Because it also comes with the fact of, like, yeah, what kind of utilities do you actually put into the house and whatnot? Like, do you have a composting toilet? Like, how many people are okay with someone having a composting toilet in their backyard? Like,
that's a huge thing.
Yeah. And yeah, so it's interesting. I like that the tiny house the tiny house communities have been kind of a response to that, where it's like, we'll just make our own little place, but they usually be out in the large rural areas, and people don't like, because that's the other thing too, is like all the jobs are within the big cities, but if you want to live in a tiny house and you want to live in a tiny house community, you're going to be like almost an hour outside of any large city and stuff. But and then that almost sounds like you're living in the suburbs. It's like, well, so tiny house or the suburbs? But yeah.
Well, that's why it's the privilege. If you have friends or family, they're gonna let you live in their yard. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
If you've got that, then like you've got it made. But do you have that?
Yeah, no, it's very true. Very true. So for within cities and stuff, to kind of combat the housing crisis, you are seeing it's more of like trying to motivate the cities and companies to where it's like, let's just build affordable housing for all these other people. And then we don't really need to like do these little tiny house villages. We don't have to try and do any of this stuff. We can really just accommodate, like, hey, we can build like a 50-story micro.
They can absolutely do that. There's no reason for them not to do that. There's nothing stopping them. There's no legislation stopping them. They absolutely have the funding. They can absolutely do it, but they don't do it. It's weird. I mean, I've been to like city hall meetings on this, and they'll even talk about like, oh, here's our like 10-year plan, our 30-year plan. Here's how many houses like we can build and how many apartment buildings we can build, and it still drastically falls short of their like projected amount of people coming to live in Seattle. And you're like, stop building houses and start building massive apartment complexes. Like, if people want to live here, give them a place to live. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how much it actually costs to live in any of these major cities now, because it is like it feels like at a time where it's either you decide to pay rent monthly or you decide to pay mortgage monthly, and it's basically the same price, and like
Well,
no
yeah,
matter what
that's
you
the
get.
worst part is it's the same price, but there's a ton of obstacles for you getting the mortgage, right? You have to have the assistance, you have to have the money down. And now the biggest thing going on right now is cash buyers, because we have like such the wage gap inequality. You've got people that have hundreds of thousands of dollars, beyond amounts of money I can even comprehend. They can just go in there and buy houses for cash. So that's what's happening, right? And the city could so easily say that, if you've got 10 people bidding on something, and if any of them are a first-time home buyer, you have to choose their offer if it's the same offer, right? Like, it would be that easy. The city could write one piece of legislation to ensure that first-time home buyers actually got the home. Because yeah, there's first-time home buying programs. They'll give you money for the down payment, but you have to go up against people that are willing to pay all in cash for hundreds of thousands of dollars. I was talking recently because my boyfriend just bought a house, so I went through that whole process with him. And the only reason we did it is because like I wrote this like huge letter. Like I wrote this huge letter like about us as a couple and our adopted dog, and I like put him like in his military fatigues, and I like wrote like this whole thing. Like, we're adorable and we're sweet and we're precious, and he has tens of thousands of dollars as a cash down payment. Like, but it like took that much. Like, we had to beat their cash down payment, and we had to like convince them that like we were better people that wanted the house, like beat out all these other offers.
Jeez.
So like, if you just like have maybe 10K cash down, you're a first-time home buyer, like you're not going to get a house. And the state is just letting that happen. The state is just letting people fill up their investor portfolios. You could put a cap on how many properties somebody's allowed to own. You could put a requirement that you have to accept first-time home buyers as long as they meet the same stipulations. There's a million things the city could do to help people. And instead, they're like, oh, we built Nicholsville with like 10 cardboard boxes for people to put their tents in. Like, no, that's not helpful.
Yeah, doing the absolute minimum, that's basically nothing.
It's just a photo op. Like I always tell people, those Tony House towns, like they're just photo ops. Like they're not helpful in any way, shape, or form. They just like take away from the big picture, which is people that should be able to afford homes and willing to make the mortgage payments still can't have the home. And then you've got people that can't afford rent. Like,
yeah. Do you see kind of like with, I guess, how the future of the tiny house movement, if this helps to kind of redefine how a city layout looks like, where it's like basically all of downtown becomes all of those super tall skyscrapers with affordable housing, and then you slowly get out into it's like you get more of the dense suburbs, and then maybe you get out into the tiny house communities that surround the entire city? Or
I know that people build tiny home communities in their yard, right? I mean, there's people in Everett that I know that, they bought the main home and they had their tiny house, and then they like put that up for rent, and then they just set up like RV utility slots so they could get 4 tiny houses in their backyard. And I see a lot of people do that. Anybody that has they live like in a residential area that will let them keep a certain amount of RVs in their backyard, like they can use that to create their own little mini tiny home communities. And I've seen that a lot in cities that kind of surround Seattle. And as a general contractor, I have tons of people that have me convert their garages into homes for anyone, for a relative. And so you're going to see that, like you're going to see every single garage turn into housing. You're going to see these DADUs. You're going to see tiny houses in yards. Like you're just going to see that in every single yard, because if there's property, like somebody's going to live on it. So I think you'll absolutely see that. And hopefully we get to the point where people can just put a bunch of tiny houses on land, but there's a huge pushback on that. So that's going to be a tough one.
Okay. So you kind of see it to where it's like the suburbs are almost becoming more dense.
Oh yeah, they're just going to get denser. And it's honestly often even the difference to you. People often think like, oh no, like if you let them add the DADU, it's going to become more dense. No, that family member is already living in the main house. They're already living in the pantry or on the couch or whatever. And they've just now saved up enough money to put them outside because they're tired of sharing a house with them. But the density has already happened. People have taken in friends or family or whoever because they had to. So adding that other little dwelling, the density is already there. That's just giving people a little bit more breathing room.
Yeah, and I feel like that's what improves the quality of life for everybody, is actually having the space to live in, you know. But yeah, okay. Well, so if anybody is thinking about trying to get into this whole tiny house world, do you have any kind of suggestions or resources that you would want to point them to?
So I always try to point people to my class because it's basically 6 hours of me touching on every single step so that you can conceive of what it takes. Because if you look at an HGTV episode, by the end of it, you're gonna be like, oh, it looks so easy. I could totally do that. But having me explain, no, you need at least this much money. You need these types of resources. You need to gather this type of education or get this professional help. This is what it takes. Here's my story. I'll share stories of, 30 other tiny home people that I know personally. Like, let me share real personal stories with you, not just like HGTV lies. So if you go to pocketmansions.com, like you can see kind of an overview of the classes and whatnot. That's always a starting point because I spent years, and I update that slide all the time. It's like 200 slides, and I update them to get all the relevant new tiny house information of like, is this a good choice? Which pathway do you want to go down? Is it tiny house? Is it renovating a garage? Is it travel trailer for a while? Is it a park model RV? Is it a park mobile home? Is it actually getting a mortgage on a home and putting a tiny house in your backyard and renting it out to cover the mortgage? There's like so many options that people don't think of until I like put all these options in front of them and the pros and the cons and the cost and the time to do these things. So I think that is a great place to start.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, I know I participated in part of your class a few years ago.
A while ago.
Yeah. But yeah, that was a lot of very good information. Very good.
I mean, people kind of leave my class very like the wool has been taken over their eyes. They're like, oh, wow, that's way harder and way more money. And I don't know if I want to do it. But the people from my class that do go on, I mean, yourself, honestly, I could probably count on my fingers the amount of people that actually went on to actually build or buy tiny houses. Most people are like, oh, thank you for all of that information. I'm now not going to waste my money attempting to do that. Which is what I want. I don't want a bunch of lemon tiny houses they're going to see on tiny house listings that they gave up on because they didn't know how to follow through the whole project. And then they sell it, and then somebody has to tear it down to the base to try over again. And it's just a disaster. So I want people to have the whole picture way before they start.
Yeah, no, getting the reality check. it's what's needed.
The reality check. And not just that, but like, yeah, my class is about 6 hours. And then I include 16 hours of building videos now, which I don't think I had when you took my class, but I have a deal with tinyhousebuild.com. So
nice.
Their entire course of them single-handedly building a tiny home, they let me purchase at a really tiny discount to include in my class ticket so that you also get all of that construction on top of my like overall thing. So it's a huge amount of information.
Yeah, and all of the tiny house information is a little overwhelming in the beginning, and you should really think about it.
Very overwhelming, and my most common thing is people write to me and they're like, well, I've been on the YouTube, so I don't know why I should talk to you. And I'm like, well, I passed statewide sweeping legislation after building and designing tiny houses for now 7 years, and I personally know all of the big players, and I can tell you all of the horror stories and all of the success stories, and I could literally tell you one thing about your tankless water heater that could save you like $5,000-$10,000 in repairs if you don't mess it up. So maybe just come to my class.
You've been through a few things.
It's like, I don't know, because yeah, just on a base thing, right? Like I spent $50,000 on my first house, and easily $20,000 of that is mistakes, between plumbing mistakes and electrical mistakes, mostly plumbing mistakes. The plumbing mistakes were very, very expensive to fix. Thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to fix my plumbing mistakes. So like that alone, like
yeah, no.
Let me tell you about some people's tiny houses that tipped over because they didn't balance them properly. Like nobody ever talks about that one.
Nope.
So let me tell you how to not have your tiny house fall over.
Yeah, kind of important if you want to move a lot.
Yeah, really important. You start to tow that thing and it falls over. Pretty much game over at that point.
Yeah, and hopefully you weren't on a highway with a bunch of other people driving around you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Taking tiny houses down the road. I've done it. It is not fun. The weirdest thing that happened to me taking a tiny house down the road was, I love those locks where like you push the little buttons, to open the lock, like so you don't have to use the key, like it's got a pad.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I think I haven't done the research to figure out why this happened. I think it's actually an earthquake function, but riding the tiny house down the road, it would unlock the keypad and the door would like keep swinging open,
Oh,
which
no.
I'm not prepared to happen as we're like in the middle of the highway. That was awful.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's funny because I was even considering getting one of those those locks like put on my door, and it's like, oh, very good to know now.
Yeah, see, little things like that. Like, let me tell you, good choices, bad choices,
Yeah.
horror stories.
Yes. Know all the horror stories before you start into all this.
That's what I try. Like the first probably hour of my class, like I go over like the legal definitions, I go over like the big pressing questions everybody has, and then I just get into like, let me tell you all the worst stuff that happens that's super duper common and people are like terrified. And then I'm like, oh, but let me show you how you could just do some research and take your time and go through this process. And then by the end of it, it's like, do I want to spend that much time? Because it's a huge amount of your personal time. Or do you want to just buy one? In which case it'll cost, $80,000. And people are like, oh, I'm absolutely not going to pay that much. To which I say, okay, that's fine. Like, you don't have to.
No.
Do whatever you want.
Yeah.
I just want people to have the information so they don't build a half-built tiny house that they can't live in, because that really breaks my heart,
Yeah, it's always sad to see somebody like super excited to be on this journey and like really like, yeah, I want to be minimal and sustainable and everything like that, and then it's like you get halfway into it, or like even just like 3 or 6 months into living in the house, and you're just like, can't do it, done. I don't want this.
Yeah, no, my actually biggest piece of advice for people is to actually go on tinyhouselistings.com and buy a really cheap tiny house, like a really cheap one, like a little like gypsy wagon type thing or whatever, and just live in it for a while and really figure out what it's like to live in a space that small. But it's like my first tiny house, it's still a very nice house, but I had never lived in a space that small. So there's tons of things I didn't really think about until I had lived in it. So like my tiny house now, my first tiny house was 160 square feet. This tiny house that I'm in is 240 square feet.
Oh.
And that's a really nice size. For me and my boyfriend, still too small. But he's gone now. So this is a perfect size.
Nice.
He's fine. He still comes back. But no, he's like, yeah, I need a real size house. And I'm like, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Because how long is your current one?
This is on a foundation, and it is 12 feet wide by 20 feet long.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Whereas my old one was 8 by 20. So this is just wider. It's just a wider version, which is a huge deal to me. Having that width is huge, because you can have your little U-shaped kitchen, and you can have a wider bathroom, and you can have these things where like when you're in that narrow hallway, you can't have those things.
Yeah, there's my walls like right here basically. So yeah, 8 feet wide. That's it's tight.
Yeah, it is tight. Yeah, I really like this layout a lot more. And my bed's downstairs. Like that's my bed right behind me.
Oh, nice.
And I like that a lot. I liked my loft, but I often would actually sleep downstairs because my house had like my bed upstairs, and then it had a couch downstairs that turned into a bed. And I often just left it in its bed state because I liked being able to walk on my bed. And the way like my bed behind me works is like I have it's like a closet. Like there's the bed, but then there's like closet rods surrounding it. So like when I'm sitting up in bed, there's actually like clothing over my head. But I don't care because then I can just stand up in my bed. I'm in my closet. And I get to have this full bed, and I don't have to like worry about sitting up, and like there's a loft right there.
Yeah, just hit your head on it and everything. Yeah.
So the loft is important in a tiny house world, but if you don't have to, and if you have the width, I love that the bed is just there. So that's my most favorite difference between the two sizes of houses.
Yeah, I even considered for a minute, because I saw a few people where it was like, yeah, just raise the kitchen a little bit, and then the bed is just a pull-out drawer. I'm like, oh, that'd be awesome. But
yeah,
I decided to go with stairs and a loft, and It's good. I like it. It's fits
Yeah.
me perfectly and all of that,
Yeah.
but it's definitely not for everybody.
Well, and that may not be your forever tiny house, right?
Oh no,
You might,
yeah.
you know, and I love that too, right? Like I had that tiny house. I built that in 2014, and I built this house last year in 2020. And I already know from this house what I want to do. I heard that the first house you ever build, wait, no, it's like the first house you ever build, you build for your enemy. The second house you build for your friend, and the third house you build for yourself. Like that's just how it ends up, right? Because like you end up hating all these things about your first house you didn't realize, and then like you kind of fix those, and it's better in your second house. But then by the time you get to your third house, you're like, okay, I figured it out. So I've already got plans for the next house.
It's a never-ending thing.
Yeah, it's a never-ending thing. And I just love building stuff. Like as soon as I finished this, I was like, oh, I want to build the next thing. But this house is cool. If you ever come and see my house, because my desk is actually a player piano. So we have like this collection of player piano rolls, and like right in front of me, like I mean, it's a piano, and then it's a player piano. Because I had this vision that people always joke that you can't fit a baby grand piano in a tiny house. So I was like, I am going to put a piano in the tiny house. That was like my big thing.
Yeah.
So there is a piano in this tiny house. So if you come visit it, there's also a sound room. There's like a closet that's a sound room over there.
Okay, I'm jealous. I am definitely jealous now, because it's funny. Like this actually, what my computer is sitting on right now is a leaf of a countertop that is high enough for me to store an electric drum set in, because I needed that. I just needed to have a drum set in my house to just play on every so often. But now where we're located, we have 3 cats in here, and so now we're actually about to build a catio that is well, it's going to be primarily also a patio because we just want to like hang out there too, but it's also turning out to where that is going to actually be larger than the tiny house.
Oh, and I believe it.
It's kind of ridiculous where it's like this add-on is actually a whole nother house, really.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Yeah, it's funny where things go, and I'm also addicted to building at this point, to where it's just like I need to keep making things. I don't know why, I just want to keep making things.
Oh yeah, I always have to be building something. Like it drives me nuts. Like as soon as I built this, I was like, okay, I'm in it now. Can I build the next one? Because I did a lot of fun things in this house, right? I gave myself heated floors in this house, got the piano, I got a studio room. I did a double shower head in the shower. So there's 2 shower heads on either sides. They each have their own valve. So me and my boyfriend can take a cold shower and a hot shower at the same time because I'm just extra like that. There's a water tap right here. So like I can be sitting at my desk and put my water glass against this water tap.
Oh my gosh.
I put like an Insta hot water thing at the sink. I have a full stove. I have a full fridge, full microwave. It's all full size appliances. Yeah, I like put everything in here. But the next one's gonna be even fancier.
Nice. Wow. Yeah, just always the next level.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, okay. So are there any resources or suggestions that you would have for anybody that wants to do like a tiny house community, like within their own backyard or out in like the big rural areas?
Yeah, so I think the best way to do that is like how they did it over in Everett, which is they basically found out how many RV storage spots they were allowed to have in their yard, basically. So that's kind of a call to the land use zoning department for wherever you live. You say, hey, I have a bunch of RVs, because I do, like I like them. How many of them can I have in my yard? And what are the restrictions? What are the stipulations? Because some of them will be like, you can only have RVs in your yard this many days out of the year, which is a really random one, but it kind of stops people from having RVs kind of rotting away in their yard. So basically, like, I mean, I know they successfully did it in Everett, so I think that's a good start. And I know they've done it in Monroe, that's a little further out. But I would start there, right? Like, talk to land use zoning department places and be like, hey, how many RVs can I store in my yard? And if they say like 3 or 4, like, awesome, because then you can have a main house and then you can set up the tiny houses and you can legally pull power, pull water, pull sewer if you need to. And like that costs way less than building houses and putting foundations on. And now you can have 3 or 4 tiny houses in the yard and maybe share the house as a main house, or maybe you live in the main house and people live in the tiny houses. And that's just a great way to do it because you're adding a bunch of housing that you totally legally could do. And now you don't have to fight with like the city or people getting upset. They can call the city on you all they want. You're like, oh no, it's totally legal and legit. Like, sorry you're upset about it. Not sorry.
No, that is a fantastic way to go about it, because that was something I never even knew about, was RV parking spaces. Like, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean that's really what you have to do. Like if you call the city, the biggest, oh my god, this poor guy was posting, I don't know if you saw this in one of the groups, he's just like, they won't let me change the title to the tiny house because they don't know what it is. And I'm like, yeah, it's not a tiny house, dude, it's a trailer. It's just a trailer. It's nothing other than a trailer. That's it. So you just go to them and you say, I want to like sell my trailer and change over the title to somebody else. That's it. Like, game over. You start telling them it's a tiny house, they think it's a park model, they need this, they need that, they need the other, like, it gets hard. And so with the city, with zoning, you say RV. They don't even check. They're like, it's a certified RV. Like mine, it's just a tiny house on wheels I built. But they looked at it and they had a license plate, because I do renew its license plate with the city, and that's all they cared about. They saw wheels, they saw license plate. So it's not city property because it's not permanently attached to the property. So all they can tell me is what to do with mobile things in my yard. They can tell me how to store cars in my yard. They can tell me how to store RVs in my yard. And that's really easy, because you just call and you just say, what are the stipulations to store an RV in my yard? And they'll just tell you. And it's usually really simple. It's like, you have to be able to disconnect it within 10 minutes. You have to be able to remove it. Right? A lot of people build it and there's like trees surrounding it, like you can't remove it. And it's like, no, like you have to be able to take it out quickly. You have to be able to simply attach it and pull it out. It can't be permanently affixed to anything. It's usually really simple what they ask for. Like, it has to have tabs. It has to be 20 feet away from the front fence, and it has to be 5 feet away from the side fence for like emergency personnel. And that's really simple. You just call and ask about storing an RV in your yard. You call and ask about living in a tiny house in your front yard. Really bad things can happen. This one woman, she was living in her tiny house in her yard, didn't give it even 2 seconds of the legality of it, you know? And she calls me and she's just like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Like, they're kicking me out of my tiny house. They won't let me live in it. And I'm like, well, did you admit to a government official that you live in it as your full-time residence? Yes. Well, then I can't help you. Why would you have admitted to doing something illegal when you're not doing anything illegal? You're living in your brother's house full-time, and that's your recreational vehicle that you're allowed to recreate in. Like, that's all it is. Now, some cities don't let you store recreational vehicles in your yard. So then they can give you a red ticket and they say you have to remove it. But if you're following their rules, it's in the right place. And even if you have one of those things where it's like it can only be there 180 days out of the year, you have to have a neighbor that really hates you to try to pull that card. It's pretty easy to say, like, oh, I took it out already for the weekend, or I took it out for the summer. Like, that's pretty easy to get around. Yeah. And if there's other people that have RVs in the neighborhood, that's pretty easy to get around. But that's all you have to do. And as long as you change your driver's license to match the main house on the property, then that's fine. But she didn't. She like fought these people. She fought these land use zoning people. And she was like, I'm this little old lady and I deserve to do anything illegal if I don't think it's illegal. And this is my own home and you can't kick me out of it. And so what they did, because they had the power to do it, because the Airbnb regulations are really tough, right? If you don't have an Airbnb license, but you're letting people stay in your house as an Airbnb, the city can fine you $500 a day. So that's what they did. They sent fines to her brother, who was the homeowner, to say, you don't have a short-term rental license agreement and you're renting to somebody without that agreement. So they sent him fines for $500 a day. And none of that had to happen. All she had to do was say what she was legally doing, which is staying in a property on the home and then recreating in her tiny house. That's it. Game over. But as soon as you say, I'm using this as a full-time residence, you can't do that. Like, you have to live somewhere. If you murder somebody, they need to come to an address where you live and question the people because you've left town. You know what I mean? Like, they need to figure out where you are for your tickets and for your licenses. They just want to be able to find you. That's it. They don't care that you're living in a tiny house on the property. But if you admit to illegally basically being a vagabond with no address and squatting in somebody's yard, yeah, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. And they're going to use like whatever legal powers they can to stop you from doing that. It's just so basic. And that's like the first thing I go over in my class is don't admit to doing illegal things. And also don't do illegal things. You don't have to. You can live in your tiny house legally, easily. Like, just, it's that simple. Is my RV allowed to be here? Do I technically live in the main house? Can I recreate in it as much as I want? Yes. Cool, everybody's happy. Like, That's probably the most important part of my class. People buy tiny houses all the time and never even consider that it's illegal. And then the zoning department shows up and they're like, yeah, I live here. And the zoning department's like, no.
Can't do that.
Game over.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the interesting things that happened, I feel like, with the HGTV type when that all started happening. Was
that's
just
a huge consequence.
Yeah, it's just like, yeah, I'll just live in this now. It's totally fine. Don't even think about any kind of legal factors of actually living full time like this.
Yeah. Like, I mean, and that's such a privilege. That's such a crazy privilege for people to be breaking like so many laws and not even consider it.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, I'm breaking like multiple statutes. Huh.
Whatever.
But I'm like a middle-aged white lady, so you can't possibly do anything to harm me. Like, and it was also really sad because like if she had taken my class, I actually had a woman that did refuse to take my class because she didn't want to pay, and then something like that did happen where she couldn't legally live in her tiny house. I'm like, well, that's what I go over in like the first 10 minutes, so you know, that would have been cool.
Yeah, helpful stuff.
But I also can't like broadcast that either, right? People are like, oh, I'll make a YouTube channel, make a video about it. I'm like, I'm not gonna get on YouTube and tell people to do super illegal things in a not illegal way. Like, if you ask me about it, I'll tell you. But like, I'm not gonna like broadcast that, you know? Because people like that have got kicked out, right? Dee Williams, right? She was broadcasting tiny house stuff. And the city came down to her and was like, oh, cool, we read about you in the local paper about how great you are because you built your own tiny house that you live in totally illegally. Like, get out. You know, like, it doesn't really help to publicly make awareness about it either.
Yeah, no, it's rough, like trying to figure out like the best way to have all this happen, which is, it's kind of like, that's why I wanted to even talk about this kind of stuff, because it's like, you get to a certain point, especially with new people coming in, is like, okay, so are we going to have like half of our entire generation living illegally across the entire nation, or are there options? Can we do this actually properly and not actually have to worry about like, oh no, my house is going to get taken away, or I have to like last second find out a new spot to live like all the way across the state or someplace else?
Well, and I think what you said there is the most important thing, is that those are two separate things. So like, people have always lived illegally, right? Always, 100% from the beginning of time. As soon as something was outlawed, right? Like, people live however they can live. Like, if you look when we had the massive city, the Seattle fire, right? Everybody's houses burnt down. Nobody had anywhere to go, okay? And so what a lot of people did is they would dig out pits near like the water line. They would dig out pits and they would just put something like over, like a thing of plywood over it. And the police would come and fill those holes with water to get them out of those pits. After the entire city of Seattle burned down, that was still the city's response to people just trying to sleep without like being rained on or set on fire, okay? Like, and I think like, I always think back to that, is like, it's all about suffering and they want you to suffer. It's not about you getting to live like legally or safely or with peace of mind, right? Because if you go down the route of having a mortgage, that's stressful. That's an incredibly, horribly, insanely stressful thing that is like the rest of your life living under the weight of this mortgage, right? You lose your job, you get hurt, you miss a couple payments, it's over, right? That's horrible. And you get kicked out, you get evicted, what do? You lose all your stuff. Whereas you choose to live in a tiny house situation, it's also a stressful situation. But if you get kicked out, you could just tow that tiny house somewhere and still have all of your stuff and still be warm and still be dry. Maybe you have to live in a camp parking ground for a little while, but like, you're still okay. And like, you haven't lost your home. Whereas like, you default on your mortgage and you get your home taken away. How much time do you have to like get your possessions out and be anywhere? And now you're on the street and now you don't have anywhere safe to be. So I think living illegally in a tiny house is actually a much safer alternative than getting a mortgage that you probably aren't prepared to take, right?
Yeah, and at the very least, it almost sounds like having a tiny house is just a good backup option, just in case.
It's a hugely good backup option. Like, the people right now, a lot of people are looking to push, and they're selling a lot of tiny houses in Eastern Washington where they have the fires, because it's literally like your house is about to get killed by a blaze, right? It's about to get burnt down. So you take your tiny house, you leave, you now live in that tiny house, you come back, live in that tiny house in your front yard while they rebuild your house. So like, I think everybody should have a tiny house, if that ends up being your forever home, or if that ends up being a backup home, you should have that. I think of tiny houses as these like amazing emergency things, these gap housing things. They're not a solution, but they're an incredibly useful tool, right?
Yeah, no, that is an amazing view to have on just the tiny houses in general. Is like, yeah, what if FEMA just had like a giant army of tiny houses on wheels that they could send to like a disaster-ridden area, and it's like, yeah, you don't have to worry about formaldehyde poisoning in case like they end up having to stay too long in it. And it's like, I mean, it's a great emergency response at the very least to have. So yeah, no, that's an amazing point.
So like, yeah, I think people should all have tiny houses, and I think you should go out there, and even if it's like, yeah, you spend $80,000 from a tiny house manufacturer, and maybe you pay a couple $100s a month to finance it, but then like, you can pay that off in your lifetime pretty quickly, honestly, right? So you pay that off, and now you own it. So like for me, I mean, I rent out my original tiny house, and I live in this tiny house. Honestly, I spent about $50,000 building this one too, but it's way fancier because I know better how to build it. So I got to make it fancier for the same amount of money, right?
Yep.
Because I spent a lot less money on labor because I knew how to build it. Because it's like maybe my 6th or 7th tiny house build, plus like I build normal houses for my normal job.
Yeah.
But that being said, now I have that tiny house as rental income. So I use that money to live. Like that thing has paid itself off a long time ago. And then I have it. It's still my option B or option Z. If like I need to leave, I can tow that and go live in it. So yeah, I think they're incredibly important for anybody to have. And I don't think you should look at the illegality of it as really meaning anything, because any housing situation where you're beholden to somebody else, even property taxes, is a dangerous situation where it can become illegal for you to be in that home at the drop of a hat. Anytime the city wants to reclaim property or build a railroad through your house, they can. There is no peace of mind in ownership that is possible in the United States. It's just not there. It's not real.
No, it's very true, because I mean, yeah, it's a lot of who actually owns the land at the end of the day.
Yeah, the government does. The government owns it at the end of the day. So you never own anything. I mean, my dad is on like Social Security. He has this tiny, tiny little income. I mean, I don't even, God, less than $12,000 a year. But his property taxes are like $6,000 a year. He's like living on beans and rice.
That's
And it doesn't matter that he owns the home and has no mortgage. It doesn't matter, because those property taxes just keep going up and up and up and up and up. And his Social Security doesn't change because of it.
No.
And then what happens? He will have to trade his home to the nursing facilities and the state-run facilities that trade your home for the rest of your life. And then they kill you because they don't give a shit how long you live, and now they own your home. So, and then more of that is seized by the government. Like, it's just this really lovely scheme to make sure you never like live free and clear.
It's funny too on that point that just the last thing about the nursing home stuff. I don't know if you've seen the movie I Care a Lot. But it's something on Netflix. But basically, it's like this lady that comes in and takes over an older person's life and sends them to the nursing home, and basically like sells the house, all of their possessions and everything like that. And then that's it.
It's a huge thing.
Yeah.
It's a huge, very real thing. And there's ones like where they'll claim that they're going to take care of you for the rest of your life, but they actually don't. They actually only take care of you for like a certain amount of years. And if you're still alive, you're now out on the street after you just traded all of your possessions to them. There's tons of like scam run institutions like that. It's horrifying. I think the only people that I know that like live free, like I used to work on this yacht, and we went all around Alaska. And there's this little point called Mount Baker where it's a free dock. Like, it's literally a free dock. You don't have to pay docking fees or anything. And it's this tiny little town that consists of like a post office, a laundry room, a little food stuff store, and like a little restaurant. And that's it. That's a whole town. It's like 100 feet. And everybody out there just lived on their boats and fished. Mainly they fished or they hunted on land. And they didn't have any docking fees, and they didn't really have to belong to anybody. And like, that was it. That was their life. And I think those are probably the freest people I've ever met in my life. And a lot of them were just, you know, they left home for whatever reason to escape whatever thing. And they're good. They're out there. Their kids don't have birth certificates. Like, they're hanging out, living on the water on like, and docking at free docks.
Man,
that was intense.
No,
Definitely the first time I've seen people be free, and that is getting off of land, because the state can take your land at any time.
yeah, kind of hard to take the ocean at any point, really. But yeah, no, that is very interesting too. Even hearing like the kids don't have birth certificates, because it's like, yeah, that's like the ultimate detach from anything. And it's like it's interesting seeing how people are kind of like getting creative and trying to like reclaim any kind of like power or dignity, really, and like just getting to live. It's ridiculous that the links that people have to go to now.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And people like balk at me. They're like, "Oh, you rent out your tiny house for so much money. It should be really cheap because it's a tiny house." I'm like, "Yeah, but we use it to pay my mom's property taxes. My mom's property taxes are $6,000 a year. Like her Social Security is only $1,000 a month. There's also water bills. There's also electricity bills. There's also gas. Like, what do you think we're doing with that money? Like, you know." And it doesn't stop, and the state doesn't put a stop to it. You'd think at some point, like if somebody was old enough, they would just stop charging them those property taxes. You would think, but no.
No, it's a perpetual money system. So it's like, as long as you can keep it circulating, at least, no matter what. And
you'd ironically think that property taxes would actually go back into helping house people. Like, I would want to think that, right? It's like, here's the people that own homes and they're paying property taxes because you use that to ensure other people are housed. But like,
nah,
because we signed the world, what is it? Like the World Human Rights paperwork. This is in my tiny house slides. I talk about it right at the beginning, but we never ratified it. So, and we do that a lot. So when people talk about like, oh, well, you know, we have to provide shelter and we have to provide food and we have to provide healthcare. Yeah, we signed paperwork as the United States. Like our presidents have signed that paperwork, but it was never ratified, which means we don't actually have to do it. So as an American citizen, you do not have rights to shelter, to education, to healthcare, or anything. If those things got ratified, then the government would have to provide those things. But they basically go to these peace treating meetings and they sign stuff to look fancy and do a photo op, but they don't ratify it, they don't implement it. So you still have to join the army to get healthcare, education, shelter.
Yeah, it's the greatest PR stunt of all time. Oh, goodness. Okay, well, on that note, where can people find more information about you, or is there anything else you would like to mention here at the end?
Tiny houses are incredibly useful for anyone in any time of their life. And if you want to learn about the pros and cons about that, you can go to pocketmansions.com or write to me at pocketmansions@gmail.com and take a class, learn some stuff.
Yeah.
Look at some pretty tiny house pictures.
I got addicted to that freaking, what was that? The tiny house.
Tiny house swoon?
Swoon, yeah.
The tiny house porn? I don't look at the tiny house porn.
Yeah.
I tell people to never look at it. I say look at the inside of gypsy wagons, because you know what you're gonna see? You're gonna see hooks everywhere, just like you. Look at you with all that stuff hanging from your ceiling.
All there.
I've got hooks all over my ceiling with stuff hanging from it. Right? Don't look at those beautiful tiny houses with empty counters and empty couches.
No one lives there. No one lives there.
No, my house is just like piles on piles and baskets. It's great.
Yeah, no, that's the way to live. Well, all right. It's been great chatting with you today, and thank you so much for all of the information that you shared. And it's truly a blessing to have you within the tiny house movement. You are like a godsend. It's amazing.
Oh, you. All right. Bye.